College. I'm the Head of Higher Education.
Fantastic. Hello, Kate. Thanks for coming from Bournemouth and Poole College. Josh, are we recording?
Okay.
Amazing. Okay. Quickly go.
Hi, I'm Gabriel, final year business student at Bournemouth University.
Gabriel from a student, yes, and
Matt Lewis, a solicitor, new business owner, and you use the Equal Lab space.
fantastic. Matt Lewis, a solicitor, so it could be useful to anybody in residential.
I'm Hannah, I'm part of the business development team covering the Poole and Bournemouth area for Barclays.
Amazing. Hannah from Barclays as well, and
So I go alter ego? I think I will.
Yeah.
So Nigel, National Director of the Campaign for Real Ale.
Nigel, National Director of the Campaign of Real Ale. Now we are talking. That's what we're here for.
Right. After lunch yet.
Yeah, okay. So we'll be rushing through this for free samples later on. Right, so look, thank you. Sorry for taking a bit of time. Thank you very much. We're going to dive in and get going now. So, welcome to the Eagle Labs, welcome to the event. Thank you very much for coming along, both in person and online. Today is all about people. It's about staff, it's about how we look after people, it's about how they're feeling, it's about the sort of things that we ought to be doing. You know, there's a focus around productivity, obviously, but there's actually a focus just around being good employers and being good people, and if you are an employee, about how to make sure that you get what you want. And you're being looked after yourself. So this is around how we balance workloads with life, how we divorce work from life when it's all happening in the same place. So there are issues around remote working. What does that do for people? How do people feel about that? What are the expectations of working with digital as well? So we are in a world I heard described the other day as hyper-connectivity. Which is about the immediacy that whatever happens all around us at the same time. So in a way that invades our privacy potentially, because what we're talking about could be up on social media before you know it. And there's also things around location. That whole idea of being part of a community is being eroded because people are thinking, well, it doesn't matter where I employ people from. They can be anywhere in the world. We thought it was a local thing, but if everyone's working from home, I'm hearing more and more about people thinking, maybe we can stretch a little bit further. So how do we keep people as part of a team? How do we keep people working together? How do we keep people, wanting to feel part of a culture, that they belong? And so, are there initiatives that we can do which can keep people engaged? Already I've sort of talked about staff, I've talked about employers, but actually we're all in this together, and I think that's the one thing that we've learned. So we all have similar problems, we all have similar opportunities, so that's what we really want to try and explore. So today what we're doing essentially is a live podcast, or it could be a vlogcast. You'll be able to find this, it's being recorded at the moment. If you've missed anything, you'll be able to find it on the siliconsouth.org.uk website in the innovation section, and we'll also, all being well, being able to put it up onto the 10th Degree podcast, which is a podcast that we've been running on and off of over the past 2-3 years. So we've got to a point where there are some things that we can do which can benefit everybody, and I thought, why don't we start with a little exercise, do something slightly different. So we have Tracy Howes with us today. So Tracy is a functional breathwork instructor. So this has grown out of a love of freediving. And as an advanced freediver, she can dive up to 30 meters, has mastered not just how to hold breath, but to control that too. I think 3.5 minutes I was reading. So that's pretty good, but it's actually about the control more than the length. And so what she's done is moved from being, when I met, a social media expert, which she still is, obviously, but into how do you use effective breathing to prepare and concentrate and focus. We're going to talk about this in more depth later on, but I thought, why don't we start with an exercise to get us in the mood and thinking this is the sort of thing which can help people right here, right now. So over to Tracy.
Thank you, Anthony. So hello everyone, and welcome to everyone watching at home. So this exercise is very simple. It's 2 minutes. It's used by Navy SEALs prior to going into combat, which might be how you feel when you go into work sometimes. But it's also been recommended by a professor at UCLA for prior to going into lectures or deep learning, or even going into a meeting with your team. This will create a sense of relaxed alertness in the body. So it calms the heart rate down, but it charges the brain with oxygen, so it keeps you nice and sharp and focused. And actually, if your whole team felt the same way, wouldn't that be a much more productive way to start your meetings or your lectures? So it's called box breathing, and we're going to do it together, and I'm going to time it for 2 minutes, and I invite you to join me. If you are seated, preferably, you want to have your lower back nice and straight in the back of your chair. Shoulders are relaxed. You, of course, can close your eyes if you prefer.
And we want people to be doing this on screen as well.
Yeah.
On Zoom,
We're
you're not
watching.
excused.
And as I say, I invite you to close your eyes if you wish, just to focus on the sensation of the breath. We're only breathing through the nose, so mouth is closed, and we will start. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold the breath. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Bring your breathing back to normal. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Nice and calm.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So, all set up, ready to concentrate and to focus and not be slightly out of breath at all. So let me thank you, Tracy. We're going to talk more about that and sort of how to apply that and why you should be applying techniques like this a little bit later on. So meantime, let me introduce the rest of the panel. So we have Nick Whitnell, is a sustainability strategist who believes business can and should be used as a force for good. Nick helps to navigate the intersections of brand purpose, essentially what companies ought to be doing, business strategy and citizen insight to drive powerful outcomes that balance people, planet and profit. Jen Swain is the head of operations at Three-Sided Cube. She essentially heads up the running and operations of Cube and oversees the welfare of the staff. Cube is a tech for good app development agency, which is essentially on a mission to change millions of lives for better. And some of the work that they do absolutely achieves that. It's phenomenal, some of the work they do. Carolyn Freeman is a psychologist who, after completing a master's in cyber psychology, is now a cyber psychologist. She specialises in the psychology of technology and its use in the workplace. She uses her knowledge to develop and curate content from industry leaders and academics on how technology is changing the way we work and play, both now and in the future. So feel free to chip in as we go along. This is an open conversation. Please throw in any questions. Same for you guys online as well. I'll be checking the chat. And let me start with you, Carolyn. Let's ask, how do you think people are at the moment? How are people coping right now?
It's hard to put everyone into one box of everyone is stressed, which they are. There's a lot more coming out that people are really just burnt out and really stressed and really struggling to manage work and life. And we've had 2 years where our whole lives have been upended. And instead of the rhythm and the routine that we had prior to COVID, we've had to manage and cope. And we've been working longer hours and we've been juggling so much more. So people generally are saying that they're burnt out and tired, both cognitively, emotionally and physically. So there is a real desire to get back to a place of just let me get on with work and life and get myself back into some elements of a routine. And it's kind of why a lot of people are wanting to go back into the workplace. But that doesn't really work for everyone in terms of going back to work, as you've kind of suggested. But everyone's different. Everyone's got their own struggles and own things that they have to deal with. But yeah, generally we're just all exhausted.
Okay, yeah. Hands up who agrees with being exhausted. Yeah, so that's pretty universal. It's been pretty full on. Somebody said, so it's not just me.
It's not just you.
It's not just you. It might be pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
But look, so you've talked about being slaves to the machine and the need to de-slaving from tech.
Yeah.
So how have we become slaves? What machines are we slaves to? And what does that look like? What do we do with that?
Well, out of the 5 of us, 3 of us have our phones on the desk, which means that we want to constantly be available at all times. And if you go to any restaurants or coffee place, you'll see people either on their phone or their phone on the table. That's how enslaved we are to this bit of technology. And we really struggle to let go of it. And sometimes people go on these digital detoxes. They go, actually, I just want to stop being so enslaved to it. But actually, a detox from a digital environment doesn't work. Because like any detox, whether it's food or alcohol or digital, we very quickly go back into a habitual space of constantly looking at our phones and being connected to the wider world. It's great, it's got its advantages, but we really struggle to let go of it. And someone had this really great phrase. They said, if you're not paying for an app, you are the product. And that's pretty much what we've become to a lot of these tech giants, that they've created apps and websites and technology that we are enslaved to, that we have become addicted to what they give us because it meets some primal need in us, whether it's the feeling of being connected to others, or it's that little dopamine hit of someone likes us, I'm part of this group, I'm accepted, all these little things that keep us wanting more acceptance from others and more connectivity with others. And we have become enslaved to that rhythm and routine of checking our phone all the time. And the research shows that even if you have your phone on the table while you're talking to someone, you're still subconsciously thinking of all the social media likes that you're getting, the emails you're potentially getting in, what else is going on in their wide world. And one of the things you can do is actually when you sit down at a table, you put your phone away. You don't have it within sight, because otherwise you're constantly, subconsciously thinking about what's going on there in the metaverse.
So we're just kind of overexcited when we have a little red dot appearing in the corner of the app.
We do. Little dopamine hits. It's like it's a drug. It's a drug addiction. We want that acceptance. We want to be constantly reaffirmed by others. And those of us who've grown up analog and then gone into digital space, it's easier for us to pull out of it. But the younger generation, this is where they get that peer recognition and that peer affirmation. And they don't have that same level of getting that from physical others around us.
But isn't that great if you're an employer? Because that means that somebody can respond to an email in 30 seconds. So rather than sort of having to wait half a day and you just want to get on, that you have that interaction. Are there the positives? Is that a positive or is that a negative?
It's attention capitalism.
Sorry, attention capitalism.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay.
It's basically that I have your attention as an employer at all times, and I'm capitalising off the attention that you're giving me as an employer 24/7. From the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to sleep at night, if you're constantly checking emails, I am getting from you some element of capital that I'm going to benefit from, but you're not. I'm not paying you as an employee for this time you're spending on your phone, checking emails at 10 o'clock at night or 12 o'clock just before you go to sleep, or 6 a.m. when you wake up. It is, I'm getting that as an employer. So yeah, of course they would. It's extra profits. Why wouldn't I?
Do you see that being positive to productivity? Do you see that sort of helping? Because I think a lot of people have said productivity has actually improved during lockdown.
No, productivity hasn't improved during lockdown in terms of potential. Yes, there may have been some element of more stuff happening in terms of emails, but it does also depend on how you measure productivity. Is it about the amount of work you're getting done, good quality work, or is productivity the number of hours you're spending online? And if it's about the number of hours spending online, yes, you absolutely have got more productivity because the time that people spend on that transition between work and home isn't there anymore. So you spend that time online in front of your laptop, answering emails, and checking whatever else is going on, doing your projects. But actually what the research has shown is that you're cognitively exhausted because of those extra hours you're spending. And what happens is that your actual output productivity has declined generally. So it is all about how you measure productivity and what you as a company expect. And the majority of companies see productivity as the amount of hours you spend online answering emails, not necessarily about how quickly you get the work done. You don't get paid based on you've produced 50 awesome quality projects. Well, most people don't. It's based on, are you actually showcasing and to me as the manager that you are constantly online? Are you flagging, however that is, whether you're in the office or actually working from home, are you flagging to me that you're constantly working and available 24/7?
Can I just follow up on that as well? Just thinking, because there's a kind of culture part of this as well in terms of what's the culture of the business? Is it clear around the purpose of the business, the team, the individual? And I think once you get that clearer, you can become more effective rather than just efficient. And what I see a lot in the work that I do is that once you set that clear vision of what the purpose is of what you are doing, you can then start to create more effective ways of being. And then you start seeing the synergy of actually, I might only have to do this for an hour, but I'm more effective doing it in that way than I would be if I was just constantly doing these things. But that comes from a leadership perspective that then starts to role model that behaviour that says, actually, this is the way you need to do things. And I've come from a marketing background, so for me, I was spending millions of pounds on marketing. I was looking at behavioural science, behavioural economics, and you start looking to trigger things, you start looking at this, and you start thinking, actually, this isn't right. I don't think this is the way that we should be doing this. If you look at most marketing metrics, they're not really telling you that much. They're just there because it's digital, you can measure it. But actually it's the same with productivity. Should we be looking at how people are? Should we be looking at how they're actually getting things done in the right way? And I think that's one of the big problems that we've got. And part of my business is daring to be naive. You have to start looking at things in a different way. And that's the way that I think we get better outcomes.
Do you see that people are being sort of almost deliberately being taken advantage of, or is it just one of those things which have happened and people are more in the position of going, ooh, that's good, let's not say anything, and people will just carry on doing this?
I think technology has enabled us to work, or empowered us, enabled us to work more autonomously. And because of the advantages of that, we've kind of slipped into this place of this is now the norm, rather than actually it empowers me to do my work better or work for longer because actually I now can catch up on stuff. And it's now become a norm that is now, I don't think it's been potentially something that's been forced on people. We've just taken that on as employees. We've pretty much taken on that element of how we do work. And it's now become an expected norm, rather than it being a deliberate action. Because I think we would have rebelled against it if it was a deliberate action. It just kind of evolved into the space of, I do this, now it's expected of me. And now if I don't do it, someone else is doing it and my job might be at loss, or I might be marked down later on. it goes back to those workplace biases and expectations around how you do work.
So that sounds like it's sort of all of that is contributing to why everyone universally is feeling tired, because we've just been on call because there's been nothing else to do. But you said in the past that actually some people actually quite like it though, and it does work for some people.
Yeah.
But are we kind of just focusing on them and feeling like, oh, they're doing all right, we should be okay with this? Is that a minority, majority? How does that work?
It's all about perceived norms and perceived expectations, and I think that's one of the things that we struggle with within the workplace, is that we think that because our boss, who may well be someone who works in blocks of time because they work from home and they've got children who they need to dedicate hours to, so they get up at 6 and do 2 hours work, then they sort the kids out, then they do more work, and then they have lunch, and then they do more work, and then they put their children to bed, and then they work until 10 o'clock at night. They send us an email at 10 o'clock at night, and my perceived expectation then is, oh wow, I now have to reply to that, because we're in this mindset of immediately replying to emails, when actually we don't really need to. I think I may have answered your question, but I'm not sure if I have. But I think it really is around the perceived norms that we've taken on, and there are people who are workaholics who want to work every hour that they've been given, and they are shown or showcased as, look how well they work, look how much value they give to the company. So then therefore we think, oh, actually we need to be like that as well, even though that might not be our personality type or our cognitive ability. We might do deep work that requires lots of energy, then actually we can work really well for 4 hours and then we're done, and we can't do anything productive after that. So it just depends on how we work and our personality types and our ability to actually be productive with specific hours.
I want to ask Jen in a second about kind of how that plays out for a company like Crown, but before I do, just I suppose a last thought really in terms of how do you generally try and make this better? So how do you dictate kind of how people engage with their managers and things like that, or not dictate? How do you put rules in place? Do you see that happening well?
I don't know if it's happening well. I think if you do a top-down approach to technology use, it's really going to backfire. It has to be about teams negotiating how they use technology to get their job done. I always suggest that if you've got a team of people, you sit down and you talk it out. These are my workplace commitments. These are my home commitments. These are the things that I want to do. These are the things I'm able to do. These are my KPIs and expectations. This is how I would like to work. And you agree as a team. It's almost like when you go into workshops, you kind of do workshop rules. You do team rules and expectations of saying, actually, I do work till 10 o'clock at night because I take 6 hours off during the day to look after my children. I don't expect you to reply to my email. But actually, it'll be great if you can acknowledge it the next day when I know you only work from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. because that's your key time. So it's having those agreed boundaries within the workplace. The top-down never really works. It kind of backfires in so many ways. So I would say rules is not the right way to go. It's agreed, negotiated expectations.
Okay, so it's about having a proper conversation, a grown-up conversation, and actually setting down rules that everyone can sign up to and going, oh yeah, that makes sense, rather than going, do it like this.
Exactamundo.
Okay, so it would be interesting to hear the Cube experience, but so first of all, I want to have a big thanks to Jen, because Nigel, who is the head of or co-founder of People Matter, was going to be with us, and he fell ill. People Matter is a very cool product. They're based here in the Eagle Lab as well, and they have some really clever tech which monitors the patterns of user activity on their work-based digital devices. And it's not about spying on people, but it's about using artificial intelligence to look for patterns which might show that signs of stress in people and that people need to be looked after. So if you want to find out any more about that, get in touch or have a look at peoplematter.tech, I think is their website. But Jen has stepped in like an absolute star. Thank you, Jen. And so as I said, so Jen heads up the operations at Three-Sided Cube. So do you want to just give us a very briefly, what's Three-Sided Cube?
I sure can. And I feel a bit conscious about this now, talking so much about tech, but so we build mobile apps basically, and we do that in the tech for good space. So all of our work is kind of centred around having social impact or environmental impact. Essentially, our kind of view on technology is that it's agnostic. You can choose to do really good stuff with it, or you can choose to do stuff that's harmful for humans and the environment and the planet. So we wanted to be on the good side of that. So we work with the clients like the American Red Cross, helping them kind of support their blood donation program, with the World Resources Institute, looking after forests, rivers, oceans, that sort of stuff. And a whole bunch of other clients as well who are awesome and do really, really amazing work, all the way down to smaller charities like the Child Brain Injury Trust, who support families whose children have gone through a significant brain injury. So yeah, the work we do is really, really varied, but all in the for good space, and it feeds into a lot of stuff that we've talked about already, I think, in terms of tech, how it's used day to day, leadership, vision, purpose, that sort of stuff. So
well, picking up on Nick's point about purpose, then presumably you're tech for good, doing all these things. It wouldn't look good if you started exploiting your staff too strongly with it. So how are they coping? Do you recognise what Carolyn's saying, and what are you doing about it?
I think we certainly have as an organisation, yeah. And I would actually say that we've been fortunate in the fact that throughout the lockdowns and stuff, we were still busy. We had some of our best months ever. Because funnily enough, when a pandemic hits, everybody wants to build tech for good, which is great. Essentially what we saw is that the team actually really rallied around that, and although we were all remote and disparate, working separately, individually, the team kind of culture really did translate really nicely into a fully remote landscape, which was awesome to see. And because we've been working on great products, because of the culture, because of the vision and that stuff, I think the effects that you've been talking about, Carolyn, are actually starting to bleed out now, whereas the experiences that I've had talking to other organisations is that they saw it much earlier on. After lockdown 1, for example, people were burning out and becoming really stressed and struggling. We've started to see more of that now, but luckily had a bit more of a run up to put some stuff in place to help. So, in terms of really quick, actionable stuff that we did, we use a messaging tool called Slack. I'm sure probably you've heard of it. And before the pandemic, we weren't really too conscious of when notifications were still going to be popping through. A lot of our staff love what they do, they're committed, they want to get Slack on their phone. So we made sure that notifications on Slack didn't appear after, I think it was 7 p.m, so that we draw that line. And that came from the leadership team. We wanted to be promoting that we don't want you to be on all the time, because actually you're not going to be doing your best work for yourself or for the company if you're starting to kind of be on all the time and never relaxing and resting. And the other stuff that we put in place quite early on was around how we adjusted our mental wellbeing benefits. So we introduced subsidised, paid-for counselling, up to 10 sessions for every single person in the team. And I did quite a bit of kind of comms with the team around, this isn't a topic that should be surrounded by stigma. It's something we will go through. We've all been through a huge thing. How can we better support you? We think this is a really good solution. Don't be afraid to access it. It's very much like going to see a personal trainer if you need to lose a few pounds. It's the same principle, just for your mind. So, being open and transparent about why that's so important, coming from, I appreciate what you're saying, top down isn't always the right way, but I think if you can hear the leaders of an organisation talking positively about stuff that needs addressing, then everybody in the organisation feels that bit more comfortable to do it.
Lead by example.
Yeah, a little bit.
Have you been doing any of the kind of bottom-up approach and kind of asking people what they want?
For sure, but I think that's come through a bit more on an individual basis, and to sort of capture that, and it plays into again what you were saying about sort of discussing it with the team. Flexibility has been the one word that I've been kind of beating the drum about a lot in terms of how we work, giving people the flexibility to do what they need to do, but when they need to do it and where they need to do it, and that's been, I think, the key that sort of kept us going and kept us together to this point.
So if you're keeping flexibility, I mean, that's really interesting. I suppose the flip side of that is you need to keep people focused on the job as well, and not so much flexibility that people are just spending their whole time walking dogs on the beach, lovely as that would be. So how do you try and keep people focused without becoming overbearing?
That is an exceptionally good question. And again, we kind of picked this up quite early on when we started to realise that the impact of the pandemic was going to mean lockdowns. Throughout the last couple of years, we've grown from about 30 people to coming off of 60 now, so we've almost doubled in size. And a symptom of that, as any organisation, whether you're working together in person or whether you're all remote, is that the people who are managing the organisation at the top are more detached from the people doing the doing, at the entry level in the organisation. So it's super important to be able to understand the performance of different individuals, different teams, and the whole at any given point in time. So we introduced basically a series of stuff that would measure individuals, teams, and essentially kind of a bit of a pulse of the organisation as well. So we've started to do an employee net promoter score. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but I'd really recommend it. Go have a look at it. It's essentially, without calling it kind of a happiness score, it's essentially how happy your employees are and how much they'd recommend working at that organisation. And 360's sort of peer-to-peer feedback as well. So people have always got kind of something that they know is coming in terms of something that they could improve on that is relevant based on their peer feedback, and also some stuff they're doing really well. So they always get that kind of regular check-in on stuff that's going well and stuff that they could be doing better.
How does the Net Promoter Score actually work?
So we include it on a whole survey that talks about all the different aspects of working at Cube. Are we supporting you enough? Lots of different questions. And then at the bottom, the Net Promoter Score is based on a scale of 0 to 10, I believe it is. Anything that is, I want to say, 6 or below is counted as a detractor. Anything that is a 9 or a 10 is known as a promoter. And anything in 7 and 8 is known as kind of a passive. So you've basically, people who voted passively kind of get removed because they've not really been positive or negative. And then there's some clever maths that goes on to give you an overall score. The idea is if you've got an ENPS of over 0, then you're kind of doing okay. If it's sort of anywhere above 15 to 30, then you're doing pretty well to keep your team happy and engaged.
And what questions are you asking for them to mark up? What's the indicator of happiness?
So the question, I believe, is simply how strongly would you recommend X company to other people to work for?
Right. So it's a completely independent thing that you don't manage. You're sending people off to go and do this elsewhere?
So we do it, as I said, we do it as part of kind of a Cube 360. So we send that out to the whole team, usually about once every 6 months. But you could very easily employ some experts to help you kind of navigate that as a starting point. Yeah.
Okay. What do you think are the things that people are missing from working more remotely? Or have you got people back in the office now, or how often is that going on?
Yeah, we do. And it's been a clunky experience, I think, for a little while. So trying to kind of navigate hybrid. And we're very fortunate that a lot of the team are local, so we've got a good number of people back in the office and really enjoying that. The one thing that we've kept as a constant throughout the whole thing has been our kind of like all company meetings. So we all have a stand up on a Monday morning at about 9:30, which is just a chance for everybody to feel part of it and understand about what's going on that week, what's coming down the tracks for the next kind of few weeks. And then we also do a really nice full team session on a Friday. It's around 4:00, and we usually say, grab a beer or a beverage of your choice for that. At that point, everyone sits down and we talk about a couple of things that have happened that week. So it might be kind of a deep dive into a client project. It could be, unfortunately for the team, me talking about information security, or it might be, hearing about maybe a new project that we've won that to get the team inspired about. So it's just those kind of connections and those touch points. I think keeping that consistent is super important.
What do you think are the things which work best to try and keep people happy and engaged and involved and supporting the whole Cube ethos?
I would give you a very different answer now than I would have done when I started 4 years ago, because the culture back then, I think, was more about, and this is not just Cube, this is a lot of agencies in general, but having free fruit, having good breakfast in the office, having a beer fridge, a pool table, that sort of stuff. Those kind of perks made organisations seem really kind of bright and shiny, and yes, they are. But actually, seeing how everybody's adapted to what we've just gone through, the one thing I would say that is key in terms of happiness, engagement and loyalty at an organisation is being able to provide your teams with psychological safety now. Being open that you've got a diverse workforce who are all different and unique and who all will have different needs, and finding ways to be able to support them effectively.
That's really interesting. It's really interesting on how that's evolved. And would you say that's really evolved because of the pandemic or just because you've been there for 4 years?
I don't think it's down to me at all, really. I think it's not just the pandemic, but I think we would have been probably somewhere near here at this point in time pandemic or not. I think actually the pandemic has just done a really good job of giving people a platform to talk about a lot of different things, more than perhaps we would have done.
Okay. Well, I want to ask Nick about culture. Before we do, is there anything that you feel that is absolutely inherent in trying to maintain and keep the culture in a way that people go, yeah, I'm a cube person, cut me in half, and it says three-sided cube in the middle. And kind of, how do you kind of embrace that? Or is that, am I being a bit extreme there?
No, I mean, I've used a similar analogy myself, so it's certainly not being too extreme. We recruit based on values, first and foremost, and I think that's the thing. It's the secret ingredient, I would say, that means that the people we get through the door, we know that they're going to fit with the team because we look for integrity, we look for pride in what people deliver, we look for drive, we want people who are interested in having a growth mindset, wanting to progress and have taken interest in their own personal development. If you work out what your magic ingredients are and you look to recruit based on those as your first point of call, not necessarily looking completely at skill set and disregarding the person, I think that's a really, really important place to start.
Fantastic. Sorry. Thank you. So before I move on, are there any questions? Any questions in the room, whichever camera's on? Mark.
So, yeah, I've got questions. So, and Nick, you might cover it in a minute, I guess, but I'm going to repeat the question so people can hear back here. So my question is, I suppose, a bit of a sort of culture and sort of the hybrid working model now. So again, Jen might be sort of over to yourselves, but I think obviously it's really intriguing to see how business owners manage that hybrid work model in terms of people that are happy to come in versus people that are still a bit cautious coming in, and how you manage that well-being from a culture point of view. So just the question is kind of from a culture point of view, how do you manage hybrid working and kind of maintain culture in both ways of working? Do you have
I can do, yeah. I mean, I think for me, kind of echoing what I said earlier, I think it comes back to what's the reason for you making a request, or are you thinking about me as an individual? I think sometimes we can do things because we believe it's what's expected based upon the norms and values in the system in which we find ourselves. But actually, if you can say to somebody, I can be just as effective at home, why am I coming to the office? Is this just because you like me there? Do you just want a bum on a seat? So this, for me, comes back to this idea of purpose and that kind of thing of just thinking logically and pragmatically, because sometimes I think as businesses, you get caught up into the routine of just doing the same thing because it's always been done like that. Whereas actually, what this has done is it's shaken everything up, and we've said, actually, I like working from home, I like working from my beach, I like doing this, you'll get the same amount of work, and if you're clear on what you want from me, we can then have that grown-up conversation. Whereas if you're just saying to somebody, and the sort of person who you're asking to come in can see quite clearly that this isn't really based upon logic, it's based upon just power or ego or something else, I don't know, then that becomes something. So I'd say giving people choice based around the parameters of what you'd like me to achieve in a given day, month, week, hour, whatever, then I think that then becomes, we are all adults with our own agency, our own ability to make decisions, and that becomes a better outcome for everybody.
Well, that's a good segue into kind of some of the stuff that you're doing at the moment. So Nick is trained as a B leader, so he uses the B Corp framework to drive sustainable, joined-up thinking that looks at businesses as complex, interconnected systems, and by helping people question how things are done. So, Nick, let's start. Tell us what a B Corp. Corp.
Yeah. You can say either way. Basically, so B Corps are something that started a little while ago. Actually started in America. It's now a global movement. So these are businesses that do basically use business as a force for good. So people like Patagonia were a sort of pioneer of this. You've then got things like Ben and Jerry's and things like that. So it's a community, and it goes back to this idea that you can create very powerful, impactful, profitable businesses that have a deeper purpose. So this isn't just about pure profit, this is about thinking about everyone and stakeholders, not shareholders. It's starting to look at the way that you can grow from good. And for me, it became the most powerful framework for me to demonstrate that you don't have to keep thinking about profit being the only driver, and you end up with 5 different pillars across your business. It's independently certified, it's fully transparent, there is a legal requirement, you have to change your articles of association, and ultimately it does lead to more engaged people in your business, it leads to more loyal customers, it makes you more resilient. There was less furlough in B Corp businesses. They were able to basically weather this storm more effectively. I think going back to the point of kind of for me why I started with the B Corp sort of interest, I read a book which was by the founder of Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard, called Let My People Go Surfing, which I think is very sort of relevant here. And his view was he was basically just somebody that said, I just want to make some cool products, and I'm an accidental businessman. I don't consider myself to be in this sort of business world. But he said if the surf's over 4 foot in California, near his factory, you can go and surf. That's cool, no worries, because I know that surf isn't here all the time. So we're on a planet, it's all about nature. If it makes you a better person to come back, I will give you that choice as an adult. His business grew, he just started to put more effective frameworks into his business, which were like, I will look after you, I will make sure I honour equality, kind of different diversity and things, and look where he is now. So that's what I would say, is if you are clear on what your business is, it will attract huge amounts of investment, it will attract better people who will want to stay with you for longer, and you can basically just be having fun, which is what we're all here for, I think.
How do you know if you've got the ability to become a B Corp?
So it's actually a really cool process, I think. So it's for any for-profit business, so any regardless of size, scale, wherever you are on a journey. There's a free tool. So basically, you set up an account on the B Corp website. It's called basically your impact assessment, and you just go through what basically is called a first pass, fill in your questions, see what points you get, and then you can decide how close or far away you are from potentially being a B Corp. The journey then does become longer, so you have to evidence your answers. You have to make sure your policies are robust. You will get auditors as part of, or assessed as part of this process. But the first step is just basically setting up an account and start answering those questions. It can be done in a couple of hours if you know your business well. It's basically financial data around your people, and your environmental impact as well.
So I'm really interested in the context of what we're talking about, how you get everybody involved in this. So, we were talking about trying to avoid top-down management kind of rules of kind of going, right, we're a B Corp, be B Corp, then that doesn't necessarily work. Sorry, is that just my management style? Okay, so if you want to try and get people involved, how do you do this from a way which actually starts to nurture the aspirations of the people who are involved and kind of makes them feel a part of that?
So I would say B Corp is a really, really powerful way of doing that, because it is a catalyst for those kinds of conversations, the transparency that's required, the fact that you do change your legal structure, so there is a commitment from your board or owner or whatever that might be. But ultimately, it comes down to the fact that you are sharing information with different parts of your business, which could feel quite awkward. Things like highest to lowest paid worker. Actually, for some corporations, that might be quite tricky to look at if you're the CEO.
So you have to reveal that information?
You don't have to reveal it. It's part of the process. So then that question is asked. So you then have to provide an answer to that question. You have to evidence it as part of the assessment. But what I always say is with this is there's a educational side of this. So B Corp is a process of looking at your culture, so you can start to have these conversations. But if you can embed it into different working groups within your business, you can then start to make really amazing change. So if you can say, this group of people, if it's a large business, is going to look at our workers area, this group of people are going to look at our environmental part. Within that, they start to own parts of the business, and it goes back to this idea of, if I have ownership, if I have accountability, if I have some power within myself, within my role, then you then start to feel that you actually are making a difference, and then you don't mind working a bit more effectively because it matters. Whereas the worst case is you sit in a role and you think, I could do this, and no one's going to really know or care whether I do it or don't. And then you're like disempowered, disenfranchised, and all those bad things come out. So I would say using it as a catalyst for positive change, with people owning it within the business, with the answers then having to be, some of it, some of the materiality having to be shared, is so powerful, because it doesn't happen in normal businesses. People don't talk about this stuff because they hide it. The people higher up in the business get more money than you. Tough. And that can come across in bad businesses.
So by using this B Corp's framework, it's quite a good way to be able to say, okay, well, these are the questions that we have to answer. We have to answer them with a certain amount of depth. So is anybody, I suppose it's probably asking the question, is anybody interested in trying to pursue this as an agenda? And if there are enough people who are interested, go, okay, well, how about you take this part and explore that, you take this part and explore that, and it's all sort of provided quite neatly for you in that respect?
100%, you can do like sprints within this, however you like to work in your kind of culture in your business, but you can get help externally, which is what I do. I help businesses to go through this process. You could do it yourself if you wanted to do that, or you can then basically start to own it in a way that is so empowering, and you have got people that are literally looking at questions like, well, why haven't we got a policy on this? Why are we doing that? And you can go back up to the person that's ultimately got accountability of the board, who would then say, it's a good point, we haven't got a policy on those things. It's a very fair question. And it gives you an exemplar of looking at those other people within the B Corp community of these people have a higher score, and it drives you to want to do more and do better.
And so seeing as you're coming from a marketing background, do you see this then being able to be reflected? We talked about purpose earlier on, in terms of having that purpose, and that helps to shape your brand as a business, and so therefore it starts bleeding out actually into the business side of things as much as just the operational side.
Yeah, it can do. I mean, I think there's always, for me, a bit of an inner tension in that I'd never want to give and not that you could because you wouldn't get through the B Corp process, but there are obviously a risk of greenwashing, there's a risk of purpose washing as it's now becoming. For me, it's always about, is this credible and authentic? It's why I went into B Corp originally, because I was working on different things and I had lots of different things to achieve, and I thought, because of the triple bottom line thinking of people, planet and profit or prosperity, you have to make sure they all stand up together, because if you're talking about a product in one hand, in the other hand you can't be doing awful things because you're creating a huge PR risk or disaster. You need to build the long-term brand equity, which I started to look at being, if you can be authentic and credible, which for me the B Corp framework does do that, you can then start to talk about things in you can position yourself in a certain way, you can get a higher return on your marketing investment, but at the same time you need to make sure that it is genuinely something you care about, and I will make sure that as part of my scoping that I'm working with businesses that it does matter to, because otherwise I wouldn't want to be helping somebody that feels as though it becomes a sticker or a badge on a website. This is about actually who you are as an entity and how your DNA.
Is B Corp for everyone potentially, or do you think that there are certain industries which just can't be B Corp-ish because they're dealing with weapons or with fossil fuels or something like that?
There is a disclosure part of it, so you do have to go through and say which industries you work in. So there are some industries that would very much struggle and wouldn't be able to get to a B Corp status. I think and obviously there is a huge sort of part of that around kind of what can and can't be kind of included in those high risk sort of industries. For me, a big part of it is making sure that those industries are thinking about where they need to get to, but at the same time making sure that they are doing the right things based around integrity. And I think that's where there is going to be a tension for a while, because some of our economic systems are built around certain things being the norms that they are. So it's a matter of sort of journey for some people. Okay.
So, any questions on that? Was that movement? No, it's a scratch. Okay, it's a scratch. Everyone relax. It's not a question. Don't worry. Tracy, can I just sort of come on to you and just kind of change a little bit? So, we started with the breath. Thank you for that. It's just interesting to sort of see that level of, how you just start to bring a bit of concentration into what you're doing as well. So, when it comes to doing the sort of stuff with the people who you're working with, and particularly put it in a work context, what's the underlying need that you think people want help with in the workplace? What are you trying to address by bringing in a different way of interacting?
It's a great question, Anthony. I will say, in my research around employee health and well-being, it is absolutely critical to look at customizing well-being implementation, because what works for one doesn't work for all. And talking to clients, I work with executives, CEOs, they come to me and they are typically highly stressed, not sleeping enough. They are frustrated because they feel like they don't have control over their body and their mind. And if you're managing a large team, you can't be seen to be out of control. And stress feeds into anger. And if you can't manage the baseline, that overarching effect is just going to ripple down, and then your team will get a sense of that. And, that top-down approach actually becomes really negative. So, and my approach is very much holistic. It's not just about breath work. I look at breath, mind, and sleep. You cannot do one without the other, because they all feed into each other. And, I will just say as well, for companies that are thinking, hang on a minute, how on earth are we going to implement something like this? There are companies now that do, they act as workplace well-being facilitators, where they will run an assessment, look at your sustainability, and customize programs, but get leadership buy-in. Because if the senior leaders are not bought into this process, forget about it. It's not going to happen. And it shouldn't be this tick box effect. That happened with corporate social responsibility, back in the day. So if we're talking about practicalities in the workplace, the way I work with people is through a series of practical exercises and scoring systems, so we can measure their stress response using the breath. And often I'll hear someone will say to me, "Oh, please don't make me meditate, I can't." And I'd meditate, but it's not an easy thing to learn to do. And if you have a typical racing mind, or you work with really high performing individuals, forget about meditation. Park that. We start with the breath. And when it comes to how to incorporate this, would you like me to give you a little bit of science around why breathing is
good.
so important? Okay. This is the magic ingredient, okay? We produce a molecule in our sinus cavity called nitric oxide. Now, you might be thinking, well, okay, great, what does that do? If you are a typical chest breather, you breathe from the mouth rather than the nose, what you're going to find is inflammation in the top of the chest. If you exercise and you're breathing through the mouth all the time, exercise-induced asthma is the result. The other result is poor sleep, not being able to regulate your nervous system, so you're constantly in fight or flight. The heavy breathing, the shortness of breath, the tightness in the throat, that is just, it's not helping your mental state. So we focus on nasal breathing because the nitric oxide is only produced there. So by learning how to breathe through the nose with the mouth closed and focusing on the expansion of the diaphragm and slowing the volume of the breath down, you are actually able to manage your vagal response or your nervous system a lot better, calming stress, reduce anger, improve your sleep, reduce snoring. This is just, the list goes on and on and on.
What does nitric oxide actually do?
Nitric oxide is a vasodilator. And
of course. sorry.
And
you should know that.
Yeah.
Should have known that, Anthony, in my notes. So the way it works is when you inhale through your nose, the vasodilator, the nitric oxide, opens your blood vessels and it allows more oxygen-rich blood to get to the lungs. By having full functionality of the diaphragm is needed to activate the lungs because the lungs don't work on their own. They need the muscles to work properly. So we work on retraining the muscles. And then, of course, your olfactory system, your nose, is connected directly to your brain. So by breathing through your nose, you are oxygenating your brain. Important for deep learning, memory, concentration, focus. And if I take the science and the practical exercises and we transplant that into a working environment, how does that look for your employees? Well, first of all, your CEO will be a lot calmer if I work with him. But essentially, if you are training people and giving them these tools, if you are in a stressful environment, for example, you have to have a difficult conversation with your boss, or you are the boss and you have to have a difficult conversation with your employee, you can employ a technique where you inhale for 4 and exhale for 6 to calm your heart rate, bring your cortisol levels down, calm your stress response, and be more in control of how you respond, so less reactive. If you are doing a lot of public speaking, I have a series of exercises where we can calm the nervous system down, boost the brain so that when you walk out on stage or you're on Zoom with 200 people, you're in control. And that is a gift you give yourself for life. And I say this to my clients who work with teams. This is not just something to learn for today. Once you know how to use this, and you've experienced one of my sessions, you take that with you for the rest of your life. So you're actually building your team from the inside out. What else? Public speaking. Another simple tool you can use. Let's say you're at your desk and you're just having one of those days. And you think, I need a moment here. Get up, go make a cup of tea. All it takes is 90 seconds of slowing the breath down, in and out through the nose, to reset that feeling of tension and stress in the body, calming the mind. And what means so much to me is that I've suffered with sleep issues, with anxiety. I ran 2 businesses in London prior to where I am now, and I was just constantly working. constant, and thinking I'm doing really well, I'm performing, completely burned myself out. And so combining the knowledge and the sensation, understanding the sensations in the body, it takes you on a very personal journey.
Would you say that it's not just about the breathing, it's the fact that you're taking the time to breathe is also helping you in terms of that mindfulness that you have when you're saying you're about to have a difficult conversation? Is it also just sort of mentally just going, okay, just getting myself in a slightly different space than the one that I was before? Or actually is it about the nitric oxide in the breath?
The nitric oxide is the method.
Okay.
But I think the way to look at this is imagine you're an athlete, because I also work with athletes. We use breath for performance, and this translates really easily into the corporate world. What we're really talking about here is shifting states from one mental state to another using the nervous system. But the hook is the breath. Because when you hold your breath, and you all did that when we did the exercise, the mind focuses like that. Because suddenly you're not breathing. But actually we don't need to breathe so much. And what you're creating with these exercises is a pause. And you're allowing yourself to change your breathing pattern so that you take control back. And this, I couldn't think of a better way to empower yourself and your team.
Is anybody else breathing through their nose a lot more than they were a moment ago? Thank you, Tracy. Are there any questions? Are there any questions on the Zoom? Now is the moment. So Ellie, for you, was saying that, interesting, we are just planning our B Corps application, and really helpful to have the employee engagement from the outset info. So that's good. Just filling in the moment here. Any other questions want to come through? Mark, yeah.
So I think that's really interesting. So I know freestyle IQ and how fast the growth has been, and obviously then increase your team and keep team ethos and well-being. Just wondering from either like a team leader or an ops director or a sole trader owner point of view, I think sometimes we forget about ourselves. So we're managing our employees and their well-being, which is fantastic, but then actually who's telling us to obviously take a step back and manage ourselves? So I don't know if there's any sort of hints, tips that work for you guys that you would be happy to share.
So Mark was just saying that quite often, whether you're a sole trader or you're a manager or you're running a big company, you frequently forget about yourself in all of this. So are there any techniques that you can suggest which would help in terms of being able to help ourselves a little bit more? Anybody want to pick up on that?
I'm going to throw my little 2p into this. One of the things, the research shows that we don't segment our work and home technology and our work and home life until we force ourselves to do so and realise that we've kind of burning out. And at that point, we start implementing some strategies. I think it is down to making a conscious decision, whether we're self-employed or a team leader, to say, do you know what, this is not okay. This is an unhealthy way of living. I need a work-life balance. And putting personal strategies in place, whatever those strategies are, is putting that in place and creating a habitual rhythm as to how you engage in work and home life. Because it is about that healthy top-down, let me show you how it's done well, versus thou shall do as I say, not as I do. And it's being conscientious of the fact that you are displaying a work-life balance model for the rest of your team. And I think having that in your mind of actually this is important. But it's also important for my family as well. So whatever my family looks like, whether that's my friends who I spend a lot of time with, children, spouse, partner, is being able to say, actually, this is how I'm taking this life on, and this is how I'm going to model it, and make it work and show you how it works. And just one more thing, building on what Tracy said about using our diaphragm to breathe. When we're looking at technology, we're either lying down or we're sitting like this. So we actually reduce the ability of ourselves to breathe, and that's one of the reasons why we often get really quite stressed. I've known Tracy for quite some time, and I know that I'm breathing a lot more through my nose than I used to. And it's actually, although I haven't kind of gone, okay, this is our started breathing through my nose, therefore I'm less stressed. I have noticed how much less stressed I am because I have that as a habitual day-to-day thing.
And I think just to follow up on that question as well, because previously I did work in a sort of corporate setting and, kind of had the sort of experience of that. And I think for me, what I started to look at is knowing myself better. So I would say as soon as you understand yourself better and back to connections to, the physiological and the psychological part of who you are, you can start looking for those signs of this isn't okay. And I think as soon as you start to know that, so even now, my own boss, I do my own things, I sometimes think I've been on my bike for about 3 or 4 days and I suddenly think, well, that's not good. So I get out on my bike and then I do better thinking and I come back more energised. Or I haven't been to the beach for a while. I haven't been to the beach on my bike, which is even better. So these are all kind of things that if I start spotting those early signs, and I would say that if you can find those people as well, so if in a corporate setting, having those kind of people around you that you trust, I think that is an amazingly important thing. So you can just go and talk openly and kind of transparently, but just looking for those feelings of like connecting to yourselves, because ultimately we are just, the humanistic side of us, we are just animals really. So it's that part of how do we breathe more effectively, how do we spot these things, how am I feeling, and checking in with yourself. And I think that's the bit that I've learned as I've gone on and got older and more experienced in my life.
Cool. I've got a couple of questions which come in through the interweb. So, how do you suggest managing and engaging staff working remotely, especially those members of the team that aren't vocal? We have both staff in the office and remote, and I'm conscious that some of those remotely aren't as connected as others. Thank you, Laura. Jen, have you got any thoughts on connecting people both in two different places?
I mean, that is the eternal question at the moment that nobody, I think, has the exactly right answer to at the moment. So we've got a similar situation. We've got a bunch of people in the office. We've got a bunch of people who are working remotely. Some who are local and just have found their setup is perfect for them and don't really want to come back. And those who perhaps are even further afield and physically can't get to us. And how do we make sure that they still feel part of everything that we're doing? I'm going to hold my hands up here. We've not gotten to the answer yet either for our team. I think part of it is making sure that you've got the right levels of communication in place between individuals, so kind of peer-to-peer, making sure that teams are getting together on a regular basis, and then giving people a reason to join those organisational activities. We were lucky enough, just before lockdown happened, we had a big awards ceremony in London just before Christmas. And we invited the whole organisation. We were prepared to pay for travel for anybody who wanted to get to us, but we also did a hybrid version, so people could join online and experience it. Even if they couldn't be in the room. And I think giving the opportunity to do that is going to be the only really real way that you can provide the tools for people to continue to engage.
Okay. Before I move on to the next question, have you got anything to add to that, Carolyn?
Yeah, I've always got something to add.
Yeah.
Well, they say that now we need to change the way we do leadership and the way we need to manage. And part of that is about exactly that, increasing the level of communication you do as a manager, both to the people in the team as well as outside the team. The other is treating everyone like they're a remote worker, whether they're in the office or not. Because one of the things that people do when they're working remotely is they feel they need to constantly connect to actually showcase or meet the same level of that face-to-face contact that we have. So allowing people to not have to do that, but also giving that clear, consistent communication and objectives and needs of the team and what needs to be achieved to every single person in the team on a very regular basis, and having the same level of communication back. So it's about being clear, it's about constant communication from the managers, and having a very set idea of what needs to be achieved as a team. Is what the research shows needs to really happen with around remote and hybrid working individuals.
Thank you. A couple of ideas there for you, Laura. I hope that helps. Cecile also added, picking up on what you were saying earlier, Nick, to your question, sometimes you just have to say no. That's it. So Charlie's asked a question. Just interested to hear if anybody has introduced more mental health first aiders into their workplace, and if that has reported any benefits or challenges. Has anybody done that at all? Or out there?
Yes.
Where?
Yeah, we have.
Yeah?
Yep.
How's that worked for you?
Really well, because So we've not had a mental health first aider in the business until December last year. So we've now got a people operations manager called Josh, who is awesome. He's done loads of work with young people, and on that journey has done mental health first aid courses and qualifications. And I think the key benefit that I think I've seen from having somebody with that knowledge and expertise in the team is that it adds another layer of paint on to the comms that we've already done around it's okay to talk about this stuff. It's all right to tell us how you feel. It's all right if there's stuff going on at home that is affecting your ability to do your job. It's great if you let us know, because then we can help put the support in place. So, you know, whether they're actually going and speaking directly to Josh or whether they just feel more empowered to talk about what's going on for them, for me, there's no downsides.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, look, we've reached time, so I'm going to stop while we're ahead. A couple of things. Thank you very much to Barclays for hosting us today and inviting some of your customers, particularly online. Hope that's been useful. I've found it really interesting. It's just, thank you for your time as well. I wanted to say, everyone has said that they're very happy to do a one-to-one session or conversation. If you found anything particularly interesting, would like to pick up on that. Jenny, are you public yet with what's going on with you?
Not quite yet.
Okay. So there are some. There is some really good knowledge, I was going to say here, and some great expertise, and there are some consultants as well. If you want to see about how you can apply some of these things in your own business or circumstances, either reply back to the email that you got from us, or just get in touch with me, or put a note in the chat. We'll send a follow-up afterwards, just so you've got the ability to get back in touch. So look, thanks. Actually also want to thank BCP Council, who have put some funding towards helping all of this happen, and the camera crew and all of that. So as I said before, it's all going to be available on siliconsouth.org. Get the plug-in now. And a big thanks to our speakers. You've been brilliant. So Tracy, Nick, Jen, Carolyn, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely fascinating. We're doing a few of these. We're actually back at BAE. You'll be able to see Jen, who's back in operation, coming into that one as well, in the 8th of March. And we're working with the coastal bid, particularly looking at about how this applies, kind of a broader topic, not the same topic, but we're looking at around social and marketing and operations. So that's on the 9th of March. So if you want any more details, again, siliconsouth.org.uk. So thanks very much. Thank you, panel, and goodbye.
Can we take some photos for social media?
Yes, please take photos with the cameras you've got on your table.
Yeah, your camera's much better than mine. But
Thanks, everyone.
We'll have to kind of huddle.
Calming tones, I think. I find you're very calming when you talk.
Oh, good.
Here we go, guys.
I've been practicing.
Sorry.
There's always going to be someone in the back pulling a face. Yeah.
That's just the way I look. Well, there's lots of sandwiches and things outside still. So yeah, do grab something.
I think I might have snuffle a few seconds.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
End Feb. Yeah, so it's all going to come around very quickly. And then straight into a contract. 6 months.
I shall move that way. I know, I'd like a picture of it. Or can I take one of you? Take one of each? Yeah. I'll take one of you. Use my
Just in the pandemic, so suddenly I was like, shit, I've got to try and build a business. I was trying to find a contract when the pandemic started. Fortunately, I was able to get a contract for 9 months. I managed to earn reasonable money, it was like a day rate and stuff. And then I built my kind of nest egg. It was. And then I did then take too long off. So last summer, I had lovely time. Literally, because I was like, building my business, but really just wanted to spend my time with it. I think when you're done,
There's worse things to do, right? And also, you give yourself a freedom to do that.
Yeah. It's with the
I have to go right up.
Yeah, I'll come over here. No, you come over here.
I'd love to go for coffee.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sure not have the door in the way.
Very happy. It is. Yeah, I think
demonstrations of the whole time. I'm clearly not a demonstration. Right, one more this way.
It's flowing, but it's knowing when you want to get started.
Alternate some breathing.
It's the